Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're located. Thank you very much for joining Learnosity's webinar today to talk about richer math assessments. You'll have to forgive me if I occasionally slip into saying maths, as we do on my side of the pond. It's a tomato thing, but please forgive me for that. So my name is Ben Powell. I'm in the Learnosity Business Development Group and manage our partner network. We're going to be talking today about some of the issues and challenges in delivering best-in-class online math assessments, and I am delighted to be joined by two esteemed speakers, one of whom you can see here. We have Jason Jordan joining us from Knewton. Jason is Chief Product Officer, and the one you can't see here. Jason has a long history in the education market, and he'll introduce himself shortly. We're delighted to be working with Knewton, helping them improve their student outcomes as it relates to their adaptive course solutions. And our second speaker is Eli Luberoff, who you can see, the founder and CEO of Desmos. Desmos is one of the founding partners in our partner network, and Eli will be talking to you about how we're working together to provide a deep expertise in the area of online learning and math assessment. So they'll both introduce themselves in a second. Just a couple of housekeeping points, and Saoirse, if you wouldn't mind just hitting the next slide. Thank you. So everybody's on mute at the moment, but we do encourage you to ask some questions, so please do submit questions through the GoToWebinar panel. And you can also submit questions to marketing@learnosity.com. We'll get those answered and get those back to you. If you could note who your question is aimed at, that would be helpful, whether it's Eli or Jason. And we'll also be recording this call, and we'll email the recording around, and we'll also post it on our Learnosity YouTube channel overnight. So thank you very much. And Jason, if I could ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jason Jordan. I am Chief Product Officer at Knewton.
Thank you, Jason. And Eli? Oh, Eli, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Technology is quite difficult for us here. So Eli Luberoff, founder and CEO at Desmos. We've been around for about 6 years. Probably known best for our graphing calculator, but we're going to show some stuff today that very few people have seen. So really excited to be here with you both.
Thank you very much, Eli. And Saoirse, if you could just flick to the next slide. Thank you. So as I said earlier, Desmos is one of the original partners in our Learnosity partner network. They gave us the impetus in some ways to set up this network. And we feel strongly at Learnosity about collaborating, working collaboratively with best-in-class solutions to help our clients provide their own market-leading solutions. And the categories of our partnership, you can just see here on the slide. We work with assessment item banks and provide the interoperability of their assessment content within our client network. We have development partners to help create end-to-end solutions using the Learnosity API. We also have a team of custom content creation companies that will create bespoke assessment content using our authoring tools. And then our technical and feature solutions group, of which Desmos is part of that, is using their technologies, we offer a combined offering to address industry needs, specifically around mathematics in this case. So I'm going to kick off the discussion and ask Jason if you wouldn't mind talking about some of the industry trends and needs that you're seeing at Knewton, specifically as it relates to, technology and assessments and the work you guys are doing in your mastery-based learning products.
Sure. So yeah, there are several trends happening right now in higher ed. One of them is a shift seemingly to open educational resources, and the other we think that has started at the K-12 level and is moving into higher ed is mastery-based learning. So at Knewton we utilize a mastery-based learning platform. And we harvest open educational resources. But the one thing about OER is that there's some really good instructional content out there, but we have had some trouble finding homework items and assessment questions that are of the quality that we need for our courses at Knewton. And so that is why we have chosen to partner with Learnosity and Desmos, so we can provide our customers with that really high quality homework and assessment content to sort of package with the instructional content that we use.
Excellent, thank you, Jason. And could we just dig in a little bit to the mastery-based learning that you mentioned, just to sort of elaborate on what that actually entails?
Yeah, essentially, on the Knewton platform, what we do is we are constantly diagnosing the students' strengths and weaknesses and trying to move them toward mastery of the material. So every time a student in a Knewton courseware product sees a piece of instructional content, we ask them to either solve associated problems or answer associated homework solutions to that content. And through that, and through a bunch of tagging of the content that we use, we're able to offer every student a personalized learning pathway through the material. And we're also able, by asking them really well scaffolded questions, to determine where they may have a knowledge gap in the material, so we can then remediate them or provide them instructional content to fill that knowledge gap. And so the basic conceit behind mastery-based learning is that if a student is able to master a Knewton adaptive assignment, then when they encounter those learning outcomes on an associated high-stakes assessment, like a chapter test or a midterm or a final, they will also be able to master the assessment and be able to prove their mastery on the assessment question.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And does that, how does that sort of drive things like, you know, the types of questions asked, technology-enhanced item types, open-ended versus multiple choice, that sort of thing?
Sure. So we use a variety of item types, and you know, the Knewton platform is based on item response theory. So we learn as much about a student when they enter a correct answer as we do when they enter an incorrect answer. All that data from the student response flows into the adaptive learning sort of pathway. And it really helps us determine how to keep the student on a path toward mastery. But you know, it's really important to us at Knewton to have a variety of different ways to ask our questions, and so the item types come into play there. But also, it's super important to us to have a mixture of both kind of low-level problems or questions on the Bloom's taxonomy scale, as well as higher-level questions on the Bloom's taxonomy scale, because we want to make sure that students are truly understanding the material and they can truly master the material to the point where when they do encounter the material later on an assessment, that they'll be successful. And so that's why the partnership with LearnAsti and Desmos is so valuable to us, because it gives us the capability to ask both the kind of skill and drill questions at scale, but also the sort of higher order thinking questions that Desmos provides.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. Which could be a nice segue into you, Eli, unless there's any other sort of trends or, you know, market factors you're seeing in K-12 specifically that are, you know, sort of relevant to this conversation. Have we lost your sound again? Yeah, I can hear you. Anything you want to add to what Jason's just talked about, or should we go to the demonstration?
No, I think it's spot on. And to add to one of the things that you said earlier, Ben, one of the things that we've really enjoyed about working with Learnosity and then working with Learnosity's partner network and partner network is that these questions are just way too hard to do solo. It's way too hard. And we kept running into people where they said, we love your technology, we love the types of questions you can ask with your technology, but we need something like Learnosity's incredible infrastructure for asking these questions and serving the right question and doing analytics on it and integrating. And we are one of, I think, a small number, a growing number of companies in ed tech, along with Learnosity, where we're not trying to solve the whole puzzle. We're trying to work really seamlessly with the people who are doing the best work in the space. And so same with Knewton, same with Learnosity, same with probably everyone who's listening to this call. These problems of getting students to love mathematics is the one we focus on, but to learn effectively and to measure where they are, way, way, way too hard to do solo. And so part of why it's so fun to be part of this network now.
Excellent. Thank you. And I should just say, I'm just looking at the questions submitted already here. There's a shout out to Eli from McHewitt. So just thought I should point that out as you as you go through it.
I love that. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, the trends that we've seen in this space match up exactly with what Jason was saying as well. And I want to expand on that a little bit, and it'll lead right into what I'll show, which is that we're seeing three things that folks in the marketplace are starting to kind of expect as normal, each one of which is pretty difficult, and putting them together is extremely difficult. And so that's the intersection that we're trying to live at. So the first one of those is just asking richer, more interesting types of questions. It's not okay anymore to just ask multiple choice. And this is, I think, why Learnosity has grown so effectively, is that it makes it possible to ask a wide-ranging set of questions in a beautiful, beautiful package. So that's just now expected. You can't get away with just asking multiple choice anymore. The second one is what Jason was saying, which is that you need to also understand what the students did. It's really easy to, I mean, not easy, but to put together a really rich simulation or animation, but then to evaluate the work that the student did and be able to feed that into a system is another piece that's expected and also difficult, especially when stacked on top of asking more interesting questions. Very easy to grade a multiple choice question, very hard to grade an open-ended graph question. And the third one is accessibility, where it's now becoming expected. This is a trend I just love, that everything that you build will work for a wide range of students, including students who have, for example, strong visual impairments or students who are even blind. This is now becoming an expectation. And when you stack that on top of asking rich open-ended questions that you can evaluate, it's a really, really hard challenge. One that I think the whole industry is in early days of, but I'm excited to show you what we've been able to put together with Learnosity's APIs. So yeah, Ben, do you think I should dive into a demo?
That would be superb. Thank you.
Let's do it. So, a little backstory. Is my screen showing up for folks?
Yeah.
Excellent. A little backstory. Learnosity and Desmos have been talking for years and years. As I said, there's a small collection of companies in the edtech space that we really look up to and respect, and Learnosity has been on that list from basically day one when we founded Desmos about 6 years ago. And originally, the thinking was that Learnosity has these features, including things like calculators that you can open up. And as Desmos becomes more and more ubiquitous, so our graphing calculator now used by about 10 million people a month, and we're built into the digital SAT and built into the state test in a bunch of states. And we kept going to Learnosity and saying, we should make it so that your customers can also add the Desmos calculator into your environment. And so we started with that. And you can see a demo here. If you actually, this is a pretty new page, one I suggest, the Learnosity Partner Networks. And it shows a bunch of Learnosity's partners, not just Desmos. And here we've got a question where maybe a graphing calculator would be helpful. And you can press this button and up pops the Desmos graphing calculator. The same one you see on our site, the same one that you see if your students go into the digital SAT. So we can type our parabola, and here we've got a parabola, and use all of the features of Desmos as well. So things like seeing how different parameters change the shape of this parabola. So this is where we started, but I think on both sides we had ambitions to go even deeper, because Learnosity has these really rich APIs that make it possible to build custom questions, and I think from the start, Learnosity has acknowledged that their area of expertise isn't math and that they wanted to partner with a company where it was. And so we were thinking, what would it look like to leverage Learnosity's custom questions APIs and build interactive, accessible questions? Instead of just a feature that doesn't tie into the assessment, what if we were able to actually evaluate what students did in the assessment? And so that's what I'm going to show here. Early days for this, we have been working with Knewton really closely to build a few items. In fact, I'm going to have some surprises for Jason here today. And this is a demo that we can share out after this, this webinar is done. So over here, this is a sample authoring portal. It will look familiar to those of you who use Learnosity today. For those of you who don't, you absolutely should. It's a wonderful platform. And you can see down the side, these are all of Learnosity's items. So they've got their math items and they've got their graphing items. But now we can add in a section of what we call Desmos items here. And I want to just show a couple of these, pausing between them to get some feedback from Ben and from Jason. But at a high level, our goal was to take some kind of really rich mathematical items and turn them into accessible parts of the Learnosity platform. So I want to start with a really simple one. This is the first one that we built. The challenge, it's a rectangle question, and the challenge is to create a rectangle with specified attributes. Quick check, because technology always makes me nervous. Can you guys still hear me and see my screen?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, so here's a classic rectangle question. I remember this one, it was in something like 4th or 5th grade, where I first got a question that looked something like this. So it was, create a rectangle with an area of 36 and a perimeter of 26. So this one requires some interesting math. You can do it by guess and check. You can also do it by setting up the equations. It's 2 equations, so x times y is equal to 36, and 2x plus 2y is equal to 26. And you can solve it, and you end up getting a rectangle with a width of 9 and a height of 4. But I'm going to write in my checks for whether it's correct, which are that the area is 36 and the perimeter is 26. And then we're going to go see what this item looks like inside of Learnosity. So we've set it up so that it looks just like other Learnosity items. And what you can do now is adjust the size and shape of this rectangle. So here, if I make it an 8x4, area is 32, it's going to tell me that that's wrong. And if I make it 9x4, the area is now 36 and the perimeter is 26. But the thing that makes this powerful, and this goes back to what Jason was saying about being able to evaluate based on interesting right answers and interesting wrong answers, it needs to be possible to express your answer in a lot of different ways. And in this one, you can. So this rectangle works, but so does this one. If I move everything over by 1, that's going to work. It'll even work if I make it so that it's 9 tall and 4 wide instead of the other way around. So I can do something like this, and that one will be marked correct. So a lot of ways to get this right and a lot of ways to get this wrong. The student could get this wrong by going to something that's like 6 by 6, and we know that the area is correct, but the perimeter isn't. And so you can start to get really interesting information out of both how the student did it right and how the student did it wrong. And this is achieving that, hopefully it's achieving that elusive goal of having a question that is both really open and interesting and also machine gradable, where this can just hook right into Learnosity's hooks, right into their reporting, right into their authoring, right into all of the different pieces Learnosity's put together with this kind of open-ended item type. Pause there for thoughts from Ben or from Jason. Jason, do you remember when we showed you this one for the first time? What were your thoughts on it?
I did. You know, I do remember that, and I think that that this is a real competitive advantage for us, which is why we're so excited about it. Number one, and number two, it just generates a ton of data. You know, the student response to this type of a question generates a ton of data for Knewton that we can then use and incorporate into the adaptive learning profile of the student. So, so these types of questions are super valuable for us.
And also, Eli, just to add to that, I mean, Jason just said about the amount of data that can be generated from a question like this, and that's absolutely right. It's that, we're talking about the student experience and the ability to capture multiple correct answers, or to be able to machine score multiple correct answers, and then the ability to get the data out of what the student gets right and what they get wrong. But equally, we shouldn't overlook the fact that authoring of this question was super simple, right? It took you, what, 3 seconds?
Yep. Yeah.
Which is absolutely huge. The companies, the people who are on the phone from various companies that are creating these question types, I mean, it could not be simpler than that to author a complex question that generates, complex data.
Yeah. So it took me, 10 seconds to author this question here, but only because it's building on a decade and a half of work that Learnosity has done and 6 years of work that Desmos has done. And so one of the other things that's so nice about that is that all of the work that we've done just comes built into this item. So this is going to work if you're on a phone or if you're on a tablet also, because everything that Desmos does works on phones and tablets. And this is going to automatically be accessible. So here I can drag these points using the arrow keys on my keyboard, because that's something that's just built into Desmos. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel every single time that you want to make an item. This item here, it took, as you said, just a few seconds to author here, but even creating this item, because we have this foundation to build on, that's a process that takes hours or a day instead of weeks or months. So another piece of what's been exciting about working inside of Learnosity's APIs and with partners like Knewton is that we can actually rapidly iterate on these questions. And so for the next one I show, I want to give an example of that. We demoed this for Knewton about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and they had a piece of feedback on one of these items. So here's a question that we made, which is a slope-intercept question. And like a bunch of these questions, we wanted to make sure there were a lot of ways to get it right or to get it wrong. So here's one where we could say, for example, create a line with a slope of -1. And we can set it so that the slope has to be -1. And the intercept can be anything. And so in this one now, it's going to mark this as correct if I create this line, or if I create this line. Any line with a slope of -1 is going to work. And so we showed this to Knewton, and one of the things that they said is that's great, but what would make this even better is if there was a way that we could have another line on the graph, so that you could ask a question like create a line that's perpendicular to the graph line. And so we can do that by we added this field where we can graph something like y equals x plus 3. And now we still know that a perpendicular line is going to be one with a slope of -1, and so we can instead say, create a line that's perpendicular to the provided gray line, something like that. And so now I go over into preview, and here's the gray line, and now this is going to be marked as a correct answer. So we can ask these richer questions, but the thing that was great about this was this loop where we showed something to Knewton. They said, here's a way that you can make it better. We agreed, and now this item is richer for them and for their students. Jason, that one was the surprise I wanted to share with you. I don't remember if it was you or Learnoff who wanted that feature. Do you remember?
Yeah, I think that was Learnoff, but that's great, and that this is just another example of what we really value in the partnership is the flexibility and the scalability of both Learnosity and Desmos. It's really helped us solve a lot of problems for our customers.
I know we're gonna have questions at the end, Eli, but just one for Jason that's just come in that's relevant to your rectangle question from John Kerwin. What do you do with the data, Jason, from a question like this? In other words, now that you get this, now that you know the student got the area right and the perimeter wrong, what happens to that info in terms of how it gets analysed and responded to?
Sure. We tag every piece of instruction and every piece of homework and assessment content with about 15 different psychometric indicators. So that information would become part of the student's data profile in Knewton, and we might use that. You know, we may drill down on that around perimeter and see if there is some prerequisite knowledge that the student lacks about how to solve the problem. We may ask the student a parallel problem to make sure that that is actually a knowledge gap, or we may have some data history on that student that shows that they have struggled with that that subject in the past, and we would then maybe take them down sort of a tutorial path to make sure we can fill their knowledge gap.
Great, great, thank you. And John, if you have any follow-ups to that, please send them in, and we'll respond to those as well. Eli, sorry to interrupt you there.
No problem. So yeah, here I want to pause again for just a couple questions for both Ben and Jason. So our hope in building these was that we'd, and this actually anyone in the crowd as well, was that we'd hit this sweet spot of asking these more rich, more open-ended questions that are still machine gradable. And I'm curious for both of you where you felt that gap the most, what it was that attracted you to Desmos for some of our work on these, so that I make sure I demo the right stuff at the end of this. But yeah, maybe Ben first, what you'd heard from the partner network about the types of questions people wanted to be able to ask.
Well, I think, you know, as you know, the initial sort of relationship was around the calculators. So that's what sort of drew us together, I suppose, in the first place, was providing that functionality.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there's so many, like, I am not a math expert, as you know, but there's so many questions. Learnosity has its question types, and we have a very powerful math scoring engine behind a lot of our, behind our whole math offering. But there is no way that we can address all of these questions, and there's sort of diminishing returns, I suppose, to us in building, you know, all of these questions out. Because as you said earlier, Eli, you know, we're a technology company as opposed to a mathematics company, and you happen to be both, obviously. But to have that expertise that we just can't get to, it would be inefficient for us to do that. So that answer sort of applies to all of these question types rather than specific gaps, to be honest. And I'm sure there'll be many more. We're looking here at, what, 6? I'd say come back in 12 months, and there'll be an awful lot more than 6 in this window we're looking at.
Oh, 100%. 2 weeks ago there were 2. Yeah, the dream for us is that partners will come to us. They'll say, "Here's what we need. We'll be able to build it because of this foundation that we're on." Yeah, we actually saw the same thing. So for a long time, we've been working with partners where you can inject Desmos into your site directly, like what we're doing with the calculator button here. And we noticed more and more that people were using Desmos in a way that we didn't expect. Students using it to do things like draw pictures of animals, and teachers using it to build things like these interactives, like that rectangle, or like a line where you can adjust it by 2 points. And our partners were starting to do the same thing. And then they were saying, this is fantastic for the instruction side of things. How great would it be if this was also the way that assessment looked? If we could have the instruction and assessment intermingled in a way where the same types of questions that you can ask students to explore in instruction are the ones that you can assess. And we had to say, sorry, we can't do it, because there's a whole leap that you need to do in order to take these non-judged interactives and turn them into something that's part of an assessment. You need to have the standards tagging, and you need to have the authoring, and you need to have the reporting, and you need to have the data that goes to the teachers, and all of these pieces. And we said, sorry, we don't do that. We're a small team. We're too focused. And so for us, the epiphany was that this is exactly what Learnosity does. This is exactly the piece that we were missing. And I think we've been hearing from partners, vice versa, that the place where they want more depth is the place where we can contribute they love the Learnosity platform, but it's missing some pieces of math.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, how does that line up with how you guys went about deciding to work with both?
Yeah, so we at Knewton are committed to publishing kind of up and down the math curriculum. So we currently have titles from pre-algebra through third semester calculus, and we are planning titles in linear algebra and differential equations. And so, in order to meet the needs of our customers, we really needed partners who who had a very scalable system, but also who could sort of follow us into those course areas, right? So the higher you get in the math curriculum, kind of the more conceptual questions you have to be able to ask, and customers demand that we're able to serve up questions that would challenge their students at the appropriate level, but also be machine gradable. So, LearnAsti and Desmos, we looked at a lot of different, possible solutions, including building this capability ourselves. But LearnAsti and Desmos fit the bill for us, and it was a fairly easy decision to make after we saw what you guys could do.
That's great. And Jason, I know authoring for you guys is a key thing, isn't it? I mean, I know you talked about OER content, but I know that you create all of your assessment content in-house, and having a highly skilled authoring team to create these questions is only one part of the puzzle when we're talking about these complex items to author. So I know authoring was a key requirement for you guys as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So we have a small in-house subject matter expert team of about 7 people. And you're absolutely right. We author almost 100% of our homework and assessment questions in-house because it's really hard to find that outside. But we also hire vendors, usually college professors, to help us author as well. So it was really important for us to have authoring capability that was not only easy for our in-house team to use, but also something that we could quickly get those vendors up to speed on, something that was very intuitive and easy to scale and easy to use. And so, that was incredibly important to us because we are, we're moving very quickly with our course creation. In December 2016, we had about 12 courses published. By the end of this December, we're going to have 35. So we're really trying to build our catalog quickly, and so ease of use of the authoring tool and scalability was super important.
Great, thank you. Eli, what else you got?
All right, let's do one more. Let's do one more item. It's a good segue. So that one that we had with area, let's make it a little bit more difficult. And for this, want to just show what the fact that we do all of this analysis on our side means for the authoring experience. So here, let's do a classic. We're going to try to create a rectangular prism. Fortunately, there isn't a nicer word for that. Is that how you spell prism? P-R-I-S-M? We're going to do it with a volume of 36. And so here, we've now got this item. And what I like about this is that there's a ton of different ways that you can get this question right. So this could be a prism that's, for example, 3 by 3, which is 9, by 4, which is going to be 36. That's by 3. By 4, which is 36. But there's a ton of other ways that we could do this. It could be 1 by 6 by 6, like that. And it could be in any direction. But as an author, I didn't have to specify all of those because behind the scenes, the Desmos calculator is running. It's multiplying these dimensions. It's telling here's what the area is, and it's just checking against that. So you have to check a single value, even though there's a ton of different ways to get this right. So that's been kind of a core design principle in our making of these, is we want to ask questions that there's a lot of ways that you can get them right, But whereas an author, you don't need to specify each of them in this comprehensive list. You just need to specify the conditions for it being correct. So in this case, you need to tell it the volume. You don't need to tell it the dimensions, because the thing we're evaluating is the volume. The other thing that I like about this one is that when I first showed this one to Dennis Hochter over at Learnosity, it looked a little bit different. We had these pull points on the corners, and he said, you know what? I find it confusing having them there. What would it look like if they were off a little bit and had these little arrows? And the flexibility of our software behind the scenes makes it possible to do that kind of thing pretty quickly. So spent half hours this morning, added in these arrows, moved it off the ends, and Dennis was right. This is now easier to use. And so it's both fun how flexible it is, but also great that what we're getting from working with Learnosity, and I imagine folks on this have experienced the same thing, it's not just the technology package. It's also really thoughtful, smart people who give us good ideas and make the product better. And we've been seeing that with Learnosity. We've been seeing it with Knewton, and it goes right back to this idea that the problems that we're trying to solve here together are way too hard for one organization to do solo. So the more smart people that we can have working on these together, the more likely it is we're going to do the right thing for students and for teachers. So that's the end of what I had to show. I warned Ben I could demo for hours. There's a few more of these that are really fun, but I'll save it.
Well, we've got a few questions which we can certainly ask now. I guess just before we do that, Jason, anything that you want to say sort of in response to that demo? And I know we just talked a little bit going through the demo, but any sort of summary points to raise?
No, it's thus far it's been great. I mean, the other thing I will say is the accessibility issue is a really large issue for our customers at Knewton, and so we made a commitment to our customers to be WGAC AA compliant by January 2018, and it's just been great that both LearnAsti and Desmos has helped us along that path, along that journey toward accessibility. It's so difficult sometimes to get your partners to move with you on a strategic initiative like accessibility. So we were very pleased with with the commitments from both companies to help us arriving at a AA compliance level by January 1st.
Interesting, and Jason, thank you for that. There's a couple of questions actually about accessibility. So I guess this one for you, Eli, from Amanda Volder. Are you able to use things like these pull arrows using the keyboard, or is it drag only at the moment? I know you showed that during the perimeter question. It was you navigated with the arrow keys. Is that true also for the prism that we're looking at?
Yeah, it is. It is. So accessibility is something that Desmos has been working really hard at for the last about 18 months. We actually have a full-time accessibility team, which is unusual for a company our size, and it's led by a programmer named Steve, who his mom is a math teacher. Steve is blind and an exceptional programmer. And so as a result, we bake accessibility in really deep. And we started with making sure we are WCAG compliant at the AA level. And so that does require things like keyboard navigability for all of the interactions. So every movable point inside of Desmos, that's what's powering this interaction, can be adjusted with the arrow keys. So right now, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little blue border around that, that one here, and I can press my arrow keys to adjust this to the right and the left, and I can use tab to go to different pull points. And so out of the box, this is an accessible question, and all of the items that I showed today are. We've also built in some even deeper accessibility features like compatibility with screen readers when you adjust these parameters, and some other really fun features that aren't necessarily relevant to this item, but things like when you're entering expressions, making sure those work with screen readers, and we're even starting to dive really deep into things like Braille support.
Excellent, thank you. And there's a great question here from Tom Kulesa. I think, Tom, forgive me if I mispronounced your surname. And I asked this, Jason, because we were talking about this the other day. Tom's question is, can you speak about tolerance around student plotting points when the correct answer might not involve whole numbers? How does this solution manage tolerance overall? So Eli, partly for you, but partly for Jason, just to give you the background, we were talking recently about, how did you describe it, Jason? Answer tolerance is sort of table stakes, I think is the expression you used, right? You have to be able to address this issue of, you know, snapping to grids on graphing questions and, you know, numerical tolerances on other mathematical question types, because student frustration with these TEIs is one of the reasons there's not going to be you know, wide acceptance, I suppose. So any thoughts from you both?
Yeah, you know, it's true. There's no easier way to upset students than when your answer tolerance is low, and it automatically creates issues with the professors as well, because the students complain to the professors that, hey, I got that question correct and the system marked me incorrect. So we put a lot of emphasis on answer tolerance at Knewton, and we've been very pleased with that. Both LearnAsti and Desmos sort of share that commitment to answer tolerance with us.
Yeah, we've got a set of 5 company values that we write up on the wall every day when you walk in, and the first one of them is a classic. It says, "Do no harm." We just want to make sure that we're not hurting students in any way, or as you said, Jason, they're teachers or professors. And I've been subject to this, where I type in something and I added in one more significant figure than it was looking for, or I put in a period and I wasn't expecting it, or I left off a 0, or I dragged it and I'm off by a pixel, and that's not evaluating the thing we want to evaluate, and it's turning students off to the system. And so we approach this in a few ways. One of them is that we use snapping wherever we can. So like here, I can only snap these to numbers. We also do things like give students feedback. Like you can see the number under it. You don't have to count it. That's not the thing that we're trying to evaluate for students. And finally, we add tolerance everywhere. And so this is for ones where maybe it is something that you can drag smoothly. But even ones where it isn't, computers do their arithmetic in floating point. Floating point is notoriously error prone when you're doing exact precise analysis. You know, 1/3 plus 2/3 is off from 1 by 10 to the -16th if you are doing it in floating point arithmetic. And so we make sure everywhere to bake in that if a teacher would look at this and say this is right, we want our system to also look at it and say that it's right. That's just such a core value to every item that we make.
Excellent, thank you. I guess we've got quite a few questions here. I'll just pick a couple. Chris Green asks, is it possible to generate multiple questions in a variance of a question using a formula? So the idea of algorithmic or dynamic content generation and how that sort of factors into what we're showing here.
My understanding of this one is that Learnosity's got some really interesting stuff in the works around that, and one of the ways that we operate is by using Learnosity's APIs as documented and in really tight collaboration with Learnosity, so that those will then apply to these types of items as well.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and that is true. So I guess thinking of your the perimeter question type, you know, obviously you said perimeter, whatever it was, 36, and I forget the numbers, but you know, yeah, infinite number of well, not infinite, but lots of variants of that question that we deal with that with sort of CSV imports, and it's way beyond my technical knowledge to explain that. But if the Desmos stuff works in parallel with what Learnosity provides as well, then absolutely that dynamic content generation is possible. Question to both of you here from Vidar Sveen. External math tools like Desmos make it possible to make richer and more advanced questions, but it also introduces a risk of measuring not just math, but the knowledge about the tool. And how do you address that?
Yeah.
I guess maybe, well, I guess question for you, Ella, but also maybe this goes to the mastery-based learning versus sort of formative assessment, end of chapter, end of midterm semester tests that Jason, I know, is kind of pivotal in your mastery-based model.
Yeah, I mean, so we try to sort of make the student experience just as seamless as possible. So so we spend a lot of time on worrying about things like students' cognitive load and the UX design, the way we frame our questions and frame our instruction. So we can really concentrate on getting the students to learn what they need to know and answer the questions, from a sort of a realistic point of view. So I guess at least based on our engagement results with students in particular, the presentation of the content inside the Knewton platform has flowed very well for them in terms of cognitive load and their ability to persist. So so thus far we've been very happy with our student engagement and their ability to seemingly concentrate on the task at hand.
Yeah, I've got 3 thoughts on this one. So, sorry, I'm loaded up with thoughts. The first one, this is absolutely essential, and it's part of the reason that we've been working so tightly with Learnosity to make sure that, for example, the interface on Desmos items looks really similar to the interface on Learnosity items. So things like using the same check answer button and the same border and the same marking for if it's right, trying to make it so that you have to learn as few things as possible when you are using one of these items, because it'll look familiar. The second piece of that is actually that Desmos is becoming more and more familiar. So the usage numbers on that are growing really healthily, and so we're expecting that fewer and fewer students are going to show up here having never seen Desmos. There's now more search volume for Desmos than for the word graphing calculator. That kind of trend is exciting for that. But you're absolutely right that if we're assessing students on their ability to use the tool, we're assessing the wrong thing. And it's one of the things that's so great about pencil and paper is that everyone can use it. And so I think at the end of the day, it's like Jason said, of just focusing really hard on design. It's things like, we messed up the design on this one originally where it was a little too confusing what each of the points did. Getting feedback and fixing it and constantly improving. And so, yeah, burden is on us, and burden is on you to tell us if we're ever dropping the ball, us here as LearnAsti and Desmos, of a student coming in having never seen this and making sure that they're still going to be successful when they use it.
Excellent, great. And actually, to your first point, when Jason and I spoke recently, he did mention that a lot of college professors are asking for Desmos specifically by name as well, which is obviously got to make you feel warm inside when you hear that.
Oh yeah, that'll keep me going for a few more days.
There's one question that asks about feedback for the perimeter question that you showed before, and just while we're looking at what's on the screen here. But the feedback, the question said, is there some sort of feedback saying that area is correct but perimeter is not? And I know that is the case, because you can see that little X at the top there, which shows the overall questions right. But would you mind just sort of demoing that super quick?
Yeah, so this one does not give that feedback to the student, but it could. So we could add in something where it shows what part of it is wrong. Actually, in an early prototype, we had that, and we got rid of it to have visual consistency with other items.
Okay.
It's also one where, yeah, one of the interesting things is that you want to give different feedback depending on where it's used, and this is another way that the Learnosity platform is so powerful. When you're using it in a formative environment, when you're using it in a non-judged environment, you want total feedback to the student. When you're using it in a higher stakes environment, you don't want that. So it's a fun design challenge of how to give that information. We can feed that information over to Knewton and to some of the partial scoring algorithms and those kinds of things.
Okay, Wonderful. And then I think final question, and I asked this because we at Learnosity get asked this question a lot as well. This is from John Kerwin. Do your clients feel that these enhanced questions meet a standard that asks of a student to sketch or draw, which is a super tricky open question to grade? So I'd be interested in both of your thoughts on that. And like I say, we get asked that a lot at Learnosity, particularly around drawing question types, and our response is really that, you know, we capture that response, we allow teachers to look at that response and give some sort of rubric feedback, as it's just too open-ended to score with technology right now, but interested in your thoughts.
Jason, you first, or I can take this one? Maybe we lost him. Yeah, so I don't think that it does, but I think it comes close. And I think a lot of our challenge, especially as technology continues to improve, is to just do the very, very best that we can with the tools we have. This is our story with accessibility. It's impossible to make it perfect for everyone, but we can make it as good as possible with the tools we have. And a lot of the purpose of those sketching questions with things like straight lines is you don't want the students to have to fumble with the equations. That's not the thing you're evaluating. You want them to just try to draw the output. And maybe that's a freehand sketch, maybe it's a geometry tool, maybe it's like this with the movable points, and they serve similar goals. So at the end of the day, I think it's something that I'm excited as the technology improves, as our grading methods improve, as the ways of inputting. Freehand sketching is a pain on computers right now. As tablets become more normal, maybe that's going to be a more pleasant experience. But we like to think that this is a big step in that direction, letting students express themselves visually instead of through equations or selecting from a sequence of options that we set out for them.
Great stuff, thank you. Well, conscious of time, we're almost at the hour mark, and there are quite a few more questions here, but we will respond to your questions. We know who's asked them, and we have an email address to respond to you guys, so we will definitely do that. If anyone has any follow-up questions or further questions, please do feel free to reach out. You can send anything to marketing@learnosity.com. If there are questions for Eli or Jason, I'll make sure they get them, and I'll make sure you get responses. But I think all that remains is to thank you for joining us. Thank you very much to Eli and Jason for speaking. We really appreciate the chance to get the three of us together and talk about what we're doing together, which is fantastic. And love your enthusiasm, and thank you very much. And I guess to all those in the US, happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Ben, for putting this all together, and Jason, it's been a blast.
Yeah, thank you both, guys.
Thank you very much. All right, take care, thanks.